Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Yes, Randy Swaim is back, grooving to the
Woohoo!
music live on the podcast, the Zoomcast. If you can't see him, well, I got to see him, and we always do a little dance in the beginning and at the end. Coaching for relevance, yeah, that's his company. He's an amazing person, a Marshall Goldsmith, actually certified coach. Let alone so many feats and so many accomplishments. It's ongoing. And what are you trying to get a degree in now? Not that you have like not enough, let alone your pilot's license. Like what else? What are you getting right now?
Well, right now I'm finishing up my certification in neuroscience to understand how the brain works and decision making and all that. But also, I'm uh, I'm still continuing some PhD work on the
Amazing.
essence of bringing neuroscience to sort of psychology efforts and all. I was working on it overseas, but it was hard. Nothing bad about the universities or anything there, but it was just hard to have conversations. So I'm bringing it back to a U.S. University here where it will be easier to
Beautiful.
have those conversations. So that's all the parts that I'm working on in addition to everything else.
And what type of pilot are you? How do I say what type of pilot you are? You
A good
hold
one, a good one. No,
what
no,
type of license do you hold?
I'm,
How do I
I'm,
describe it?
I'm, I'm a jet pilot. I have my airline transport certificate, and I have two type ratings on it. In order to be a pilot in command on a given jet, you have to be type rated on it, trained and certified on that airplane. And I'm actually teaching and coaching other pilots to be trained and certified in in jet airplane. And I'm also using a lot of my expertise to bring in help develop other instructors and all that kind of stuff. And interestingly enough, I was teaching ground school to two European pilots uh, Monday and Tuesday this week, and we had one of our instructors who had been out on some physical things for a little while and was back in. And at the end of the circle, at the end of the second day, he was in the back of the class and stuff. And at the end of the second day, I was sort of humbled because he said, "You know what, you did great." Because I do it a lot different, where I bring up operational mindsets and understanding and all that, rather than just rote academic stuff. And uh, and so yeah, I do things a little different. And it's the coaching and the neuroscience aspects and the insights and leadership insights and all that sort of makes a difference.
Beautiful. Well, thank you for being here, for joining us. We're excited to have you again. Coachingforrelevance.com, a man who wears many hats. And today I know has a great topic for us. What is it?
Well, what I thought I'd do is, because I know in the last few weeks we've sort of talked about leadership just generally and connecting with your people and all, but I thought I would take it to a slightly different angle this
Go
week,
ahead, do
and
it.
and that is kind of focusing a little bit on the concept of strategic planning.
Okay.
When you're having to create the strategic focus and develop the strategic plan for where your company or your team is going, and how are you really going to get there, and things of that nature. It's very aligned with my organizational maneuverability concept as well. So that's sort of where I thought I would take it. And there's been a few times in my career where I've had to kind of do something that applies some of the insights that I'll sort of
Hmm.
throw out just in a general sense here. But that's where I thought I would take it this time.
Beautiful. Well, thanks for being here. Let's continue. Go for it.
Cool, cool. Well, I'll tell you what, I will simply say this, that when you're talking about leading your team, and you're talking about the concept of strategic planning, I'm not going to sit here and talk about your vision statement and your strategic steps and all that, because yes, are you going to do all that if you're professional?
Yeah.
Yeah. But there's a mindset, and I've kind of brought it out in a couple of previous shows over the last 8 months to a year, that brings out some of the insights as well. But one of the things that I kind of throw out is, if all you're doing when you think about leading your team and when you think about devising your strategic picture, your strategic action steps,
Hmm.
your strategic plan for going forward. If you do it all and then you come to your people and you just tell them, this is where we're going, this is what you got to do, and all this kind of stuff, That's not leadership. And
Mm-mm.
interesting, because what you can do is disconnect your people and get in a sense where they don't believe you in a real sense going forward. And the other part of it too is when you talk about interacting and leading your team, and I know I brought this up a few times along weeks over the last year and everything, but a lot of times the people that are more aware of the
Yeah.
risks and the threats that are coming in and things of that nature are your team members when they're at the point of attack trying to get something done. And so one of the things that I tell people you have to realize is when you're leading your team, do you want to sort of catch a little bit of a vision? Yeah, but also make sure that they have a clear insight onto what that vision looks like for your team. And also as they're thinking about it, but also as a leader, are
Yeah.
you having the kind of conversations with each of them really individually to a certain extent, where they are able to open up with what they see as concerns, what
Yeah.
they see as their risks, what they may have some things that they're not sure about that you don't know unless they tell you. And if they're out there, if you have members on your team when you're not there and they're telling each other their frustration with it because nobody knows, my fear on this, or my
Mm-hmm.
disbelief, or my lack of vision on this, or whatever, that can hurt what you're trying to accomplish. So if you think about it, when you're talking about your strategic plan, there is a sense where it's very important that you have those conversations with your people, and many of them individually. And some of the questions that you might ask would be, from your experience with where you're going in part of this, what do you see as the key threat? And you know what? Very often they may come up with something that you didn't even see, or you didn't even perceive, or didn't think about. And you know what? You sit there and you go, oh, yeah, you know what? Thanks for saying that. That's a good point. And then you come up with another question that might be saying, based on your perception of that,
Yeah.
what would be your perception for overcoming that?
You're
And
asking
that
me, or oh my,
no, no,
I'm like,
no, that's okay. Well, you can answer it if you want to.
I
You
know.
can interject anytime you want to,
Thank you. No, you're good. You're
but
good.
but but when they have a chance to process that mentally, and they think about it, and they have a sense of that, and a lot of times they may tell you something and you kind of go, point, you know what, that's a good point,
Mm-hmm.
and you include that in the strategic plan for how you can overcome that. So it's not just a narcissistic sort of approach of me just coming up with this, and my boss is patting me on the back for coming up with it, and then I dictate to somebody and tell them what to do. But it's me coming alongside them and helping them get a sense of what their vision is that they need to do to make this all happen, but also becoming aware of some risks or some fears or some threats that perhaps I didn't even know about or didn't think about. And so when you're talking about leading your team, particularly in a strategic concept like that, sometimes, again, and I've said this routinely, kind of thing, that sometimes asking the right questions is what a leader really does. And it's not like I'm stupid, so I need you to tell me what to do. No, it's not that at all. But it's asking the right questions to get your people processing and pursuing and all of that. And that's a key point. And but what that also does is, as the team starts to move forward in this initiative, perhaps on a day for an hour that you're not specifically there at that moment, they come into an unexpected threat. And if they processed it well, because you guys have had the good conversations before, they know what to do, and they can get over it and move forward. And so it when you talk about leadership and you're really talking about developing your team, That's a key part of it. And one thing that I will throw out to some people is simply this, that when you talk about those conversations, you got to realize that those conversations a lot of times need to be had even before you get to that clarity of vision on the strategic plan, because it's an aspect of development. And I think I shared this on a previous show probably some time ago when I was a site manager at Griffiths Air Force Base. And it was interesting because I could see we had a team meeting. We had 11 people working for us. Basically, we had myself and another 9 pilots, and we had an electronic warfare officer, and of course we had a few maintenance, about 3 or 4 maintenance people as well. But we had a team meeting this day, and at the end of it, I could hear the team, and they were kind of exploring with each other an idea and concept. And most people in today's world would say, well, I'm the manager, I got to be involved in this, I got to kind of go in and talk and all this kind of stuff. But what I did is I could tell they were kind of going in a good direction because of my vision as a leader and as a manager and as a contract rep and site manager. What I did is I let them explore in their minds for a little bit on their own as they talked like this. And there was one time when a guy that he and I were both F4 qualified people, as he and I were both backseaters, instructors in the F4 Phantom in the Air Force in the Guard. But he was going over to sit down to jot some notes on what they kind of came up with. And as he sat down, he sort of froze because he realized our boss is here. And he froze and he looked over at me like this. And all I did is I nodded my head and I winked at him.
Yeah.
And he sat down and made some notes and stuff. And we had some discussions and I, kind of pointed them out that it was a good direction. And I'm very comfortable leading the team in that direction. You guys came up with some interesting ideas and no two ways about it. And then we talked about what would be some of the risks that we might not expect and things like that. But you know what, when you're talking about strategic planning and you're talking about true leadership, very often it's not just about me creating something and creating some steps and then telling you. I've seen people that were just, narcissistic managers before, that their whole thing was tell them what to do. And if for some reason they don't get it done, you either attack them or you come up with excuses. Well, it should have been this way. Well, it wasn't. The different factors came in on scene. So when you're talking about leading your team, particularly in today's environment, kind of thing, where things are not always just perfectly, smooth and superficial, kind of thing. You got to be aware and help your team be aware of when unique factors come on that maybe nobody expected. And can they make good processing decisions to do that? And so, when you're talking about leadership, and particularly in concepts of strategic thinking and strategic planning, it's not just about you telling them stuff. It's about you helping develop them so that they can be part of the team in a successful way. And now, if you have somebody that just wants to dictate themselves to everybody else, that's a problem. And your company probably hired the wrong person, kind of back then. But if you get a team that your team truly believes in the synergistic team concept, and you guys really, you guys and gals, if for sure, have it that you're serious about that and committed to that, then guess what? That can be huge. And they can employ that even as they're working together if you're out sick one day. Yeah. Or whatever, kind of thing. And so it's just something to think about. Like I said, when you're talking about the strategic planning, a lot of times it's not just about me coming up with it and telling you what we're going to do. Now, I might have a meeting and say, hey, this is kind of where we're sort of going. And then I ask some questions. Yeah. And I say, what do you guys think about this?
Always asking the questions. I love it.
Exactly. What do you folks think about this? What do you see as the unexpected risks as we go forward? What do you think is going to be the one or two big things that stand in the way of us accomplishing this that maybe you don't realize? What's going to happen? How are you going to handle it when something really different comes on scene that was unexpected and all of that? So it's just something to think about, that when you're talking about connecting with your team, and of course, I know that's what we've talked about a lot in terms of leadership and everything, but when you put it in a strategic concept like that, it can be huge. And how you do it builds the trust, builds the synergy, builds the processing ability, the insight, the strategic, the situational awareness, and decision making into your team, so that even if you're not there at that particular moment, they can do what the team and you would have suggested. And that's so this aspect of leadership, even when you're talking about strategic planning, there is an aspect of developing your team members in this. And that doesn't mean that I just tell them to do and you do what I tell you to do. No, that's not developing. That's ordering, kind of thing. But creating them and helping motivate and develop them so that they can employ the decision making and the thinking that has been developed within them as they go. And you know what? Your company's better if you do that. And also, by the way, you can never tell that one or two of those people might have taken that ability up to this level because of what you did. And you know what? They can become satisfactory managers in other segments for your company and make the company better. So when you think about this aspect of leadership, and I just wanted to throw it out as sort of a quick insight, but when you put it in the context of sort of strategic planning, it's not just an academic picture. It's bringing this real leadership to it, so that dramatic insights and dramatic results can happen for your team, for your company, and for your company's future. And not just because we did this today, but people were developed such that they can move on to lead other segments of the company and bring it into the entire company's success and stuff. And so all of that is sort of a kind of a one little insight, if you will, into this aspect of leadership, and not just dictating, not just managing, not just telling people what to do, but really bringing leadership to the point where amazing results can happen. So it's just something to think about as one other little aspect of much of what we've been talking about.
Awesome. I want to work for you. You seem like the ultimate boss.
Well, you know what? It is. It's when you talk about somebody who wants to lead you, and when you're an employee and you truly believe that your boss believes in you, doesn't mean that they say you can't make a mistake. You can. We all can, right? Sure. But if people believe that you believe in them, and that you have interacted with them in such a way that they believe in you and they want to connect with you, wow, man, amazing things can happen, not only for you, for your team, but for the company. And that's a sort of a little bit more of a subtle aspect of bringing absolute leadership even into strategic planning for your team, when you're having to come up with the action steps and come up with the goals, where not only what we want to accomplish, but to what extent, what do we want to be the return on it, and how do we get there? And a lot of people in our society today tend to say, I'm going to see if I can manipulate people. That's not getting it done. You get it done where you reach out and you do it in such a way that those results happen. And when you connect with people and they want to join you, or they want to do this, or they want to help you accomplish this, or whatever, that's very, very different. But that's leadership, not management. That's bringing a leadership facilitative perspective to really bringing the results and the potential of your team to a higher level. And so it's just sort of one example of it, but kind of a interesting insight.
Go for it. Love it. My goodness. You are just always
Well,
on.
thank you. Well, I'll tell you what, I feel as a host on shows, I feel the same for you, and I appreciate it. I'm always glad to be here.
No, but you're effortless. I enjoy your conversation. I'm learning about stuff that I never knew about as a host. Learning, I mean, from someone like you, it's pretty fascinating. And you continue with your work ethic, your education ethic, your it's just your purpose in life. And you're the guy who says you're never going to retire. What is retirement?
And
You
and
you
as
truly are passionate about what you do. You
and
don't
and
meet many people like that.
you're right. And you know what? You're right, because as I shared with you before, people have asked me when I'm going to retire, and I go, when I take my last breath, because I'm
Yeah.
going to run through the tape. And as I shared with you before too, from my perspective of leadership, it's not about me getting applause or anything. I appreciate all that you just said, but it's even 20 years after I take my last breath, maybe somebody won't remember my name, but what I hope is, couple of decades ago, there was this guy who brought this insight out, and you know what? He doesn't even know me, but I applied that insight to my life, and man, it it brought magical results. And that's what I hope, kind of thing. Because as you kind of correctly implied, when you're a true leader, it's not just about you getting the attention. It's,
Mhm.
people follow you not because you pulled them in, but because they wanted to be a part of you. They wanted to connect with you. And that happens in a very different way than most people realize today. That's for sure.
And completely humble.
Yep.
Modest and humble. I think that's the way you should be. Now, hold on. You always ask me this question, but
Okay.
since you've been doing what you love to do for such a long time and helping others, have you ever had a boss that you didn't like? We've always talked about this. Has
well
there
i
been a leader in your life above you that just didn't sit right?
well I will tell you this, that there's one or two cases,
Mm-hmm.
and there's one or two cases where, in order for me to be professional and ethical and to do what I needed to do, I had to leave the full-time connection with that company.
Mm.
And he suffice it to say, he was let go by the company about 3 weeks after I did that. And because of his problems. And there was one aviation group that I was a part of, that, in fact, I'll just share this with you very
Sure.
quickly.
No, go
The
ahead.
the
Take time.
the CEO, or the director of operations, kind of sort of both. He's the owner of the company. Um, it was very early on in my flight career, and we were flying an airplane that was not certified for icing conditions up in New York, Niagara Falls, New York. And
Mm-hmm.
I think it gets snowy up there a few times a year, kind of thing. But this one night, and I won't go into the entire story, but this one night, I was supposed to fly down to Cleveland on um, one night about 10 o'clock p.m. and it was sort of snowing, and up there they had during the winter, the winds come from out of the north, and they go over the lake and they pick up water and they freeze it and they dump it on the south shore, kind of thing. And so this one day, the dispatcher came up to me and asked me when I was leaving, and I said, I'm going to leave when and if
Yeah.
I get some pilot reports that tell me I'm legal to go. And I said, I'm not going to make you do that. I'll do it. But I called down to the approach control radar facilities down at Cleveland, and I said, hey, call around and get some pilot reports on the weather.
Yeah.
And there was a C-130, an Air Force big 4-engine monster airplane kind of thing, that reported severe ice at a very low altitude. And so I told the dispatcher, I said, it's illegal to take that airplane there tonight. I'm not going. And when I came in the next day, the chief pilot said, I understand you don't like cold weather. And I said, well, not when a C-130 reports severe ice. No. And we chatted for just a second, but several people came around because they were listening to our conversation. But the president and the CEO came up in the background. And after just a minute or two of talking about it, the president looked at me. He said, you made the right call. And he went back and sit down, and the conversation was over. But there came a time when, because of something he had done, the FAA had to come in and take away the certificate of the company.
Wow.
And so they were making a choice to try to see if they could keep flying, helping somebody else out and all this kind of stuff. And he called me on the phone and he said, here's what we're going to plan to do. And I said, I'm not totally comfortable with this. I said, I don't know, but I'm not totally comfortable with this legally. And his answer was, and it goes, I'm not bad mouthing this guy. I'm not going to say the name of the company, not going to say the guy's name or anything. But on the phone, he said, well, Randy, you're either with us or you're not. And I looked I on the phone, I said, well, I'll tell you what, given this, I'm not. And I said, I'll be in there tomorrow morning. I'll drop off your operations manual, your checklist, all that. I appreciate the time that you've given me. I appreciate the flying time. I appreciate working for you, but this will be my choice. And so there have been some times where I had to take an ethical stand, and it's all worked out well. When I went part-time with that first company that I mentioned to you, where the company let that guy go, it was about 2 years later, and the manager in that same program came up to me and he said, Randy, you're the top of my list. Would you be interested in coming back full time? And I sat down, I said, well, I'll tell you what, let's talk about it for a second. We talked about with my coaching certification and all of that. Mm-hmm. And he said, well, I'll tell you what, we can work with that real easy. And I said, well, I'll tell you what, I'll come back. And I said, if it works out good, I'll be there forever. And guess what? I'm still there full time while I'm doing everything else. So it's, there are times as a leader when you have to, one of the things that you got to understand is, as a leader, you have to understand that sometimes when you're putting your people in a situation where they have to possibly take an unethical stand, and they're and are you aware of when you're doing that? Now, there may be some times where you got to do that, but very often people kind of use that as their first choice, and maybe not at an applicable ethical time to do that. So all of that is sort of an ethical awareness of, am I really connecting with my people in such a way that we can really make this amazingly happen? Or are there ways where I'm getting in the way? Am I aware of that? And when you're talking about strategic planning, am I aware of when I'm getting in the way of that success, as opposed to really multiplying the return in my people? Amazing. And so it's all that sort of aspect of true leadership that sometimes people don't understand.
Well, thank you for being here as always, and always appreciate you. Tell us how we can reach you.
Okay, it's Randy at coachingforrelevance.com. And if you go to my website, which is coachingforrelevance.com, at the bottom of the very first page, it has my cell phone number and my email. You can reach out to me there. I'm not going to give you sales pitches, as you know, Jill. I'm not going to give anybody sales pitches. If they have a need of something, we'll come up with something. But my big thing is to build relationships. And so if somebody wants to just have a conversation, I welcome that. Beautiful. And look forward to it, perhaps.
All right. Thank you so much. Looking forward to it. All right, Randy, pleasure having you back here again, as always, Coaching for Relevance. And you have a great, amazing, supercalifragilisticexpialidocious day.
I love it. I love it.
All right. Thank you so much. I have little kids. We just watched Mary Poppins last week, so it's fresh on my mind. But you're awesome. You get it. You're good with the flow.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.